Hi, my name is Jana, and you're listening to Catholic versus Jew.
So just tell the listener a little bit about yourself, if you would, please. Who you are, what you believe, and how you came to believe it.
Well, I was raised in Toronto, and my family belonged to a conservative Jewish synagogue. I went to Hebrew school and had a bat mitzvah in Israel at the age of 12. I went to a Jewish-ish overnight camp and grew up to marry a Jewish man and have Jewish babies. But when I was at university, I decided to major in Christianity. So I did 4 years at McGill of New Testament studies, church history, focus on the Gospels, and got deep into learning about Jesus and engaging with various Christian communities. I've been interested in religion my whole life, but have never been able to really connect to the observant side of my religion, of Judaism. I looked into it, I got involved with Chabad and Lubavitch briefly, but felt pretty alienated by the restrictions, specifically around women, and ended up becoming a very secular Jew and moving more towards a spirituality that feels more meaningful to me. An easier way for me to connect with God, which is not through Judaism.
Did you ever look into the Kabbalah?
No, I didn't. I think I just had sort of had it, like after university. I was drawn to a very observant practice. Like I wanted something that was intense and felt spiritual, and I wanted a community. And the Orthodox community, it was just like a bad fit for me. There's a lot of rules in Judaism, and I balk, I chafe against a lot of rules. I'm a TV writer. I create and run TV shows, and I created a TV series called Being Erica, which was probably the most Jewish television series ever in Canada, about a Jewish girl who time travels, and we did tons of religious-themed episodes about circumcision, brisses, about Passover and Hanukkah and bat mitzvah, like everything. So there's a way it's always sort of there in the background of my life, but it's not in my day-to-day life.
How were you introduced to this idea of God? Do you have a really early memory about learning how to pray, maybe at meals or maybe at bedtime? Can you just talk a little bit about some of the highlights growing up?
I would say none of that was present. It was a pretty irreligious household. There was no praying to God. There was a lot of sort of discomfort. I think my parents felt a lot of uncertainty about their own relationship to God. And I really only discovered God and my own relationship to God later in life. Judaism was really cultural. It was about the holidays. It was about family. It was about food. It was not about God. It was not about God. And it was in opposition to Christianity in a lot of ways, like there was a lot of, in the shadow of Christianity, like the minority religion in a sea of Christianity somehow. That was the emphasis, but God wasn't really around.
So can you paint a little picture of your own philosophical journey, the different sort of avenues that you might have explored? Perhaps you went down into Buddhism, or maybe you went into hardcore atheism. I don't know what journey you went on, but there must have been some twists and turns along the way. If you could just talk a little bit about that, it would be good.
Well, it really started, I was a kid and I didn't think a lot about God or religion beyond my bat mitzvah and the trip to Israel, which was impactful because I got to see Islam, Christianity, and Judaism collide in this one place. And then I went to university, and that's really where it all started for me. And I was sort of looking around and wanting to feel something, wanting to be a part of something. And I turned to Judaism first and couldn't find the meaning or the community I was looking for there. And then I started rabbinics. I was just heavily into the religious studies department. And I did some Buddhism courses, but I never seriously felt drawn there. It was really Judaism and Christianity. And I was really into the passion of the evangelical Christians. They were into converting me, and they seemed to have a very sort of active relationship with God. God was in their lives in such an intimate way, and I saw a lot of pleasure I could feel, that they had something good going on and that it was connected to their relationship with God. But then, when I would get into it with them, it was similar to the problems I was having with Orthodox Judaism, with sort of all of the religious people I would encounter, is that I couldn't get around the things that didn't make sense to me. Like sort of the regulations, the rules you had to follow, and there was a sort of, faith first and then it makes sense later, and it wasn't a good fit for me. So I was frustrated, but still very, very drawn. I did 4 years of all religious studies courses and then graduated with a lot of knowledge about the Bible and about theology and all these Christian theologians, and no job prospects at all as a Jewish girl with a Christianity degree. So I ended up becoming a screenwriter, probably because something about Bible stories, something about the magic of the Bible. I mean, there's some connection there that I haven't quite been able to figure out, but it's maybe connected to why I became a storyteller. And I ended up writing this show that was about this Jewish girl who traveled back in time in this form of time travel therapy. And therapy was something that I didn't know anything about. I'd never been to therapy. I had a life that was, in my view, very together. I had a successful job, and I was married, and I had 2 children. And my view was that therapy was for people who were really struggling. But in the 3rd season of the show, we were doing group therapy, and I felt like I needed to research group therapy in order to write about it, because I'd been sort of fumbling my way through the first 3 years on the therapy front, but I couldn't fumble my way through group therapy. So the production company paid for me to go down to California and participate in this really out there group therapy workshop that I'd heard about that was run by a woman named Anne Bradney. And that was, I guess, the beginning of my entry into a spirituality that ultimately, became what it is for me today, like how I connect today. So this workshop, I took my husband with me to that 2-day event because when I spoke to her on the phone, the facilitator, she said that I couldn't audit it, which was my original intention, that I had to participate. And the experience was so intense for us that it led to us going back a year later to a week-long group therapy retreat with her, which ultimately led to us both deciding to go back to school to become therapists individually. And he went to school in California, and I went to school in New York, and now we're both therapists. And over the course of this process, I would have experiences in these groups, with other people, where I would feel extremely expanded, and I would cry, and I would feel like a kind of a unitive experience of God, that was very powerful and had a deep and lasting impact on me. So I guess that's where I am now.
So what is the sort of title of your new worldview? How would you describe it?
Originally, this podcast was going to be Catholic versus hedonist, right?
That's not a category. There aren't enough hedonists that I have a whole category just for them. You'll have to dispel some of the misconceptions that I probably have about what hedonism is.
Maybe not. I think it's a very simple definition. Tell me about what your view is of hedonism.
Pleasure seeking.
Yes, that's right. That's not a misconception. That is 100% accurate. I am intensely pleasure-seeking. Intensely.
Did you study the early Greek Epicureans and the whole range of philosophies centered around hedonism?
A little tiny bit. It's a modified version of hedonism. I mean, I think the general view of hedonism is it's pretty negative. It's sort of like pleasure for pleasure's sake, with no regard for others. Hedonism has a bad rap. I mean, I actually think pleasure has a bad rap in general, which I think is outrageous, because I think pleasure is wonderful. I think it's one of the main points of life, to be in pleasure.
Yeah, well, this would be a good time for you to give a sort of sales pitch for hedonism and for pleasure generally. Just talk from your perspective. What have you learned?
Well, I think that it's a lot easier for people to tolerate suffering than to tolerate ecstasy. Ecstasy is a very difficult thing to surrender to completely. And suffering, it's like a lower vibration or something, and it's easier to be in. Most people think like, yeah, like I like pleasure, I like having a good time. But sort of total, undefended, like extreme pure pleasure is very hard to tolerate because it's very, very big. I think in some ways, I think it's one of the harder things to feel. I'm interested in feelings and how much we're able to feel as adults. As children, we move from big feeling state to big feeling state very, very easily. You'll see a child go from like rage to joy, to terror, to sadness, and they feel big and they feel a lot and it moves quickly. It's like they're in the flow of their feelings. And adults are much number, their feelings are smaller, they get stuck in them for longer, and most of us don't have access to certain feeling states at all. There's people who never cry, who haven't cried in years, and certainly who haven't cried in a big, messy way, the way we all routinely cry as children. And my view is that when you narrow the range of your feelings, you get less access to yourself. So if you can't feel deep pain, you can't really feel deep pleasure either, or deep terror. I mean, we shut off these feelings and control them because we're taught to, in order to be socialized and grow up and gain control over our impulses. And I think that's a very good thing. I think it has this unfortunate side effect, which is that then we're sort of numb largely as adults. And you see it when you look at the average child and you compare them to the average adult. So my sort of goal in life is to have full access and full willingness to feel everything that is inside of me. I think that a lot of choices we make in life are about, we think we're making them for rational reasons, but we're actually making them out of unconscious feeling avoidance. Because if we make a certain choice, it might take us towards feeling something we don't want to feel. And so we don't go there. But if you're willing to feel everything, then you're free in the world in a sort of magnificent way. And that's what I'm into.
I don't want to go too deep into the theoretical psychological side, but can you just name drop a few names of people that resonate with your philosophical, psychological, therapeutic approach?
Sure. I mean, the kind of it's such a new discipline, Freud and Jung, but I mean, the other guy, the main guy the discipline comes out of for me is Wilhelm Reich, who's sort of the bad boy of psychology. He went crazy and got thrown in jail and was sort of discredited. But earlier in his, it was sort of him, Jung, and Freud. And Reich, nobody really talks about because he went off the rails. But his whole thing was the body, working with the body, the life of the body. And he had some very good ideas. So that's the guy that I'm mainly interested in.
This segues nicely into my next question, which has to do with madness and becoming unhinged. Can you just talk a little bit about extreme feeling and extreme vulnerability and extreme openness and how it connects with genius and with madness?
What do I want to say about madness? There's a feeling of ungroundedness, like a lack that can happen, like a losing of contact with the ground or with reality, like in a really expanded state. You can, it's like a balance. It's like I want to be open to God and to spirit, but not lose my connection to reality. Reality that I'm body, I'm walking around on this planet. And that sort of balance is important to maintain. Some people tend to have a harder time being in the world, and some people tend to have a harder time opening to God. I'm the second type. This is just, I wouldn't say that I know a lot about madness, It's not something, for a therapist, I don't work with people who have any kind of severe mental illness at all. It's the kind of work I do is not appropriate for them. It's destabilizing because what I'm actually trying to do is destabilize people's defenses so that they have to have good contact with reality and good grounding in order to do this work where you feel a lot and you open a lot. And if they don't, then yeah, they're going to go a little crazy. It's not good for them. So I screen people I work with for that exact reason.
I came to God through solipsism. Solipsism is the belief that only I exist. Now that I'm a monotheist, I'm very happy to have God in my life, obviously, and it's changed my whole outlook on everything, philosophy and religion and love and morality and everything. But I can still sort of dabble with the solipsism, and it really is like a drug trip. when I was in my 20s, I would just talk to myself. I would walk to work for half an hour and then walk home for half an hour. And during that half hour, I would just talk nonsense. And over the course of time, doing this morning and evening every day, I started to go insane. But part of me said, don't go any further because there's no turning back,
Did you feel any kind of terror or fear?
No.
So what made you decide not to keep going?
I felt like this playland that I was entering was less real than the world that had things like social conformity and normalcy and etiquette, and the things I was doing in public were a little bit embarrassing. But anyway, we can move on from this madness topic. I am curious, though, what your perspective is on the Catholic Church as compared to some of the other denominations. I don't know if you know anything about the history of the Catholic Church or what you learned at school, but did you have a prejudice against the Catholic Church, or did you like it, or what did you think of the saints? Some of the mystical saints might have grabbed your attention.
They did. I mean, there's like a deep appreciation of beauty, which I really, there feels like there's a lot of pleasure in that, in sort of the gorgeousness of the churches and sort of the richness of all the saints, like the diversity and the stories. Like, I feel very compelled by that stuff. I mean, it's also the same sort of struggles with the rules, but, I'd be interested in learning more about it, actually.
What do you think about the notion of freedom? Is freedom central, or is it a little bit peripheral to your pleasure seeking?
It's humongous. Freedom is central to my life.
Okay. Yeah, because that's the central idea in Catholicism. Freedom is defined as the ability to do good. So all of the perfections, goodness, unity, justice, truth, beauty, they all reside in one source, which is God. And we come from God and we're designed to go back to God. This is the whole story. That's why we're here. So we're going to have infinite pleasure, infinite freedom, infinite joy, infinite peace, all the good things, the truth, the love, the beauty, everything. So it sounds pretty hedonistic when you think about heaven. But in the meantime, there is a little bit of restraint required because there are traps and dangers that would prevent us from having all of that infinite goodness.
It's funny. That all sounds exactly right to me. I'm just like, yep, that's true. So the kind of pleasure you're talking about is this very, it's this very high vibration, like love, like sort of pure. It's that kind of pleasure. There's another kind of pleasure, which is negative pleasure, which is a place where we get our pleasure when we're walking around in bodies. Is, you get pleasure from being cruel, you get pleasure in your addictions, you get pleasure from chasing things, winning, withholding, from other people, pleasure from denying yourself. I mean, just all kinds of things. There's all kinds of ways, creative ways to get pleasure negatively. And I think there's a cost to it, and sometimes I choose to pay the cost, and sometimes I don't. I think the thing that I find difficult is, I don't really understand sex, like how sex works with the kind of unitive God pleasure that you're talking about. It doesn't work that well with the God stuff.
The Bible does describe, like for example in the Song of Solomon, the sort of sexual union that Jesus has with his church, and I'm part of the church, right? So there's this sort of idea of intimacy, union, and the whole story of our pilgrimage here below is that we are on our way into the bridal chamber. We go into the tent, we close the door, and we have that intimacy and that ecstasy. I think about this every day. I'm very, very excited about that aspect of intimacy. I mean, God invented sex. Sex is one of the highest goods that we have. There's a book you might be interested in. It's called The Thrill of the Chaste. Right. Have you heard of it?
No, but I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, look, this is the problem. Everything, it's like it's like two different languages, right? When you talk about Jesus and the sexual union between Jesus and the church, it's beautiful, and it's sexual. I mean, it's like all of creation is sexual. I get that. And it's not a turn on. It's not arousing, like, to anybody.
I hope not.
You know, like the things that are arousing to us, you hope not. The things that are arousing to us have darkness in them, you know? They have darkness in them, the things that turn us on, you know? And so how to live in the world with a body that gets turned on by all these dark things, you know, because the turn on comes from like wounded places in us. And there's also a lot of goodness there. There's a lot of healing there. I really believe that. So I'm not interested at all in giving that up. Like, it's not right for me. I want the full human experience. And there's been a lot of healing for me through sexuality, and a lot of feeling God through my sexuality. And you know, so it's like when I feel God in the way that you're talking about, it's my heart, you know, or it's my whole being. It's not sex. It's not sex.
Yeah, it's more that anticipation. It's like I'm in the trenches in wartime, and I have a photo of my beloved, and I'm looking at the photo not with lust, but with true pure love, and I'm kissing the photo, anticipating that intimacy and that union that I'm going to have once this horrible war is over and I can leave these muddy trenches and go back to my beloved. So I am very excited. There's a lot of love and there's a lot of anticipation of intimacy and union. But yeah, it's certainly not sexual in any sort of
it's not hot.
way.
It's not hot at all.
No,
it's zero, right?
I am actually disgusted with myself. Like the other day, I was looking up an innocent image on Google image search, and lo and behold, they're like naked women, right? I'm not disgusted by naked women. I think it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. But I was disgusted with the sort of animalistic, lusty thing that stirred in me. For you, maybe it's like, oh, there's an opportunity to heal some wounds. But for me, it's like, I've turned away from that.
Yeah, see, this is the place we fundamentally disagree. You know, like, I think that you are a man who was born with a body, and it's awesome. It's gorgeous. I love men's desire. I think it's important for the world. You know, like, one of my favorite things to see and to experience in life is men who are out of control with desire, who's abandoned their brains and are bodies that are just consumed with lust. They get a look in their face, their eyes, like, it's like a heavy-lidded, like, drugged look. And I feel like most men really defend against feeling, you know, that they're men, that they want so much. And as a woman, you know, when I feel it from a man, I feel the perfection of something. I feel God in that, in the power of it. So it's been one of my major missions in life to support men to have their desire fully. Like, to see it as a source of your goodness and your power and your creativity and your connection to God, not as something disgusting. Let's say you see these naked women, right, on screen that come, and you suddenly feel a response. Why can't you just, like, breathe in that response, like, feel that, the eroticism?
I can, but if I say yes to the lust that's growing in me naturally, that's a sin. I go to hell if I die at that moment because I've said yes to temptation.
What's sinful about it, though?
In a well-ordered life, you're not grasping at things that are not yours. I think it has to do with justice. It has to do with truth. Like, I often use this analogy that you can use a hammer to put a screw into a block of wood, but it's better to use the screwdriver. The hammer will work, but it's going against the nature of the screw. And it's the same thing with a lot of sexual acts which I've engaged in, which were pleasurable, but which were going against the nature of the human body and what man and woman were made for. So it has to do with our human nature. I think this is the answer. Man and woman were made to be united, one man, one woman, in marriage, to have that openness to life, that procreation is possible. You're not going to block that. You're not going to block the loving aspect either. You're going to use the tool for exactly what it was made for, and there's going to be more benefit to you, more pleasure in the long term. And there are complications that come from having a society who has abandoned this basic building block of the family. I think that's a key component also. If we look at divorce rates, if we look at the home life, is the father around in the child's life? There are all kinds of consequences which may not be apparent at first sight, but which seem to be developing in our Western culture since the sexual revolution.
Fidelity, honoring our commitments, the beauty that can exist in a marriage, like all of that stuff. Like, I'm totally down. It makes so much sense to me. But it's like denying a laugh or denying your tears. It's like you didn't go looking for anything. You saw a picture of a naked woman and you had a response. The way you would startle if somebody jumped out of a dark room at you. You'd be scared, or the way you would laugh at a funny joke, or the way you would cry at something that made you sad. You had a perfectly natural response, which was attraction, or desire or whatever. And it doesn't make any sense to me that particular natural body response merits disgust, when all the other ones are like, oh yeah, of course,
No, like I said, everything about sex is good if it's done in the right place, in the right time, in the right context, in a well-ordered fashion. And I'm not saying that wholesome, saintly Catholic couples don't have wild and uninhibited sex. They do. Okay.
But I'm talking about this moment.
Yeah, I'm talking about the moment too, but the moment is an opportunity, and I would see the same opportunity if the nice old lady sitting on the bus next to me had her purse gaping open and she was gazing around her out of touch with reality, and I see a couple of $100 bills just hanging loose, sort of blowing in the breeze and about to fall out of her purse. That's an opportunity. My natural impulse is to grab it and shove it in my pocket and get off the bus.
Is that your natural impulse? I mean, I really want to challenge you on that. Is that actually your natural impulse?
Yeah, it is. By nature, I'm a thief, so I know that impulse when the opportunity is there. And I wasn't a big-time thief. I wasn't talented at it or anything. It's just my nature. I have an inclination. There are a lot of married men that don't subscribe to any wild philosophy, but they just happen to be middle-aged men, and their sagging wife compared to their sexy secretary, there's a little bit of a difference there, and they tend to go for the secretary. This happens time and time again. They saw the opportunity, they took it, they hurt the secretary's husband, they hurt their own wife, they hurt their children, they hurt a bunch of people, but they just took the selfish option. And if you talk to them, they're like, it's the best thing I ever did, we're so much happier, we're traveling, we're doing this, we're doing that. To me, they missed the point. The point is that you don't just seize every selfish opportunity that comes your way.
Well, you can seize selfish opportunities, but I believe there's always a cost. You have to decide if you want to pay it. I don't think anyone ever gets away with anything, really. Not really, But I think marriage, I think you can make it up. Like, I think you can do what you want in your marriage. It's like an agreement between two people. And yeah, I'm not into lying, Like I want my marriage to be grounded in truth. But I also don't want to be told what to do. The whole thing about infidelity, the reason it bothers me is because it's a lie, not because there's anything wrong with getting involved with somebody else when they're already married to one person.
There are many, many, many teachings of the Catholic Church that I accept without fully understanding them, but I do accept them even if I didn't understand them, even if I thought that they were confusing or sort of paradoxical. I would still accept them because I believe, I'm committed to the Church. Now, I just want to compare that with your own sort of religious worldview. You do believe in God, but do you believe that this God enforces or commands, for example, the 10 Commandments or something like that? Is there some sort of moral guideline that you get from your relationship with God, and where do you find that?
Yeah, no. So this was exactly, remember how I said I found in all the religions, it was like you have faith and then it makes sense later. Or maybe it doesn't make sense. Like you practice, like you follow what is commanded and then you begin to understand why. It's sort of the beauty of having faith, and this was always very challenging for me. I couldn't do it. Like I didn't want to. I was like, it doesn't work for me to do something that feels wrong or that I don't understand. Not only do I not understand it, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel true to me. I mean, for instance, in Judaism, we're commanded to circumcise our sons, right? I mean, it's a big deal. It's like even all the Jews who don't do anything still do that, It's like one of the last things all Jews do. And it's really, really clear. It's like the covenant with Abraham, It's like the beginning of the Jewish people. It's like a very important commandment. And when I had my son, I had a freak out because I felt like I was going to have to circumcise him, and I wasn't sure why I was doing it. And I went to and I got in a big conversation with my husband, and everyone we know is circumcised. It's like, there's not like it's anyone is not. And we went and looked in the Bible, and we looked at the whole passage on circumcision, and I read it, and then like right underneath it, there's this other passage, and God gets into this whole thing with Abraham about how, like, if you sell your daughter as a slave, this is how much you should ask for her, and that was it for me. I was just like, okay, so like these two things are right next to each other. It's clear that one of them is not a thing that I'm not down with, and so why am I going to like blindly go down with this one? I'm not circumcising my kid. And it was such a huge issue in my family. It was like, it was a big deal. But this has always been an issue for me with religion. It's like, I feel so drawn, I can't do things that don't make sense to me. And I don't get pleasure, I don't feel peace, I don't feel held in that experience. I feel alienation. So how to feel connected to God coming from where I come from? Does it ever happen to you that something is taught or commanded by the church and something inside you says no?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a famous line in the New Testament where Paul says, my flesh is warring against my spirit. There's like a battle. There's an internal tension, right, between the old man and the new man. And the old man is the man of sin, and the new man is the free man that's uniting himself to Christ. And we're supposed to kill our old man, die to sin, and be reborn,
But is it a sin for me as a Jew to not circumcise my son? I mean, I guess it is. It's a sin. It's absolutely a sin to not circumcise my son. I mean, God commanded it really, really clearly.
From your Jewish perspective, but the problem with trying to adhere to Judaism today is that I think it's pretty clear, if you look at the history of the Jewish people, that they were promised a Messiah, and everything pointed to Jesus, and Jesus fulfilled the prophecies, and he's the Messiah. I mean, I'm very, very comfortable saying that Judaism today has missed the point. And there are even passages in the New Testament that talk about the reason why a lot of the Jews didn't recognize the Messiah. It's part of God's plan. There's a good reason for it. It's not like God was sweeping the floor and he missed a part in the corner over there, like some Jews that didn't get the message or whatever. He knows what he's doing. There's a reason. And every single Jew will be saved. Every Jew will be swept up into the Catholic Church. This is one of the most bizarre things about my religion. I don't know any other religion that guarantees the salvation of another worldview, but not its own people.
Really? Is that true? We're all guaranteed salvation?
Yeah. Now the question is, who is a Jew? What is a Jew? I mean, is Woody Allen a Jew? This is the famous question I always ask my Jewish guests. Is he a Jew? So I don't understand the teaching, but I accept the teaching, and I'm excited about the teaching because I've always loved the Jews, and I continue to love the Jews. I don't understand the modern Jews, but I have obviously a deep romance with this idea of the chosen people and the whole story. It's very colorful. It's very human. There's a lot of drama, and they're just lovable, fun, exciting, smart people. Even today, I'm talking about like the Jews, I disagree with their theology since the Messiah came, obviously, but I might have been exaggerating a little bit when I said that even Catholics ourselves are not guaranteed salvation. We are guaranteed salvation if we're truly Catholic. So this is the question again. Who is a Catholic? Is Joe Biden a Catholic? I don't think so. But, I can't judge him. Is Justin Trudeau a Catholic? I don't think so. But, only God knows what's in that man's heart. Every indication is he's not Catholic. So this is the question. Who's a Jew? Who's a Catholic? And there's a principle that I like to lean back on, which is it's none of your business. This is a Catholic principle. Mind your own business.
That sounds good.
So I don't need to lay awake at night worrying about Woody Allen or Justin Trudeau.
Right.
And their salvation, or Hitler for that matter.
Right. Yeah. I didn't know that about the Jews. I didn't know that we were guaranteed salvation. Although, the whole chosen people thing is a very, it's a unique setup. I don't know what to make of it. I'd like to investigate it more. I mean, the way the romance with the Jews, like from the Christian side, has always been like very interesting to me.
You felt that among your evangelical friends too?
Oh my God, they love the Jews all day long. It's like, it's yeah. It's a thing for sure. There's a thing.
What do you think about the afterlife? What do you have waiting for you on the other side?
I have no idea. I mean, I don't presume to know. I think we're not meant to know on some level. I mean, but the thing that makes the most sense to me, which I go with, is reincarnation. It feels to me like I'm here in this particular life with these particular constellation of people to learn something, and that there's a way that I have like a life task. Like something I'm supposed to practice or learn about or be challenged with in this life. And I can see that, like if I look at my life, I can see themes and I can see things that are hard for me and that I continue to work on and struggle with and that might be with me for my entire life. So that's what I think. Yeah, that's what I think.
I'd like to plant a little seed in your mind, your heart, and your mind right now.
Sure.
And that is that you've been fooled by Satan and the demons into thinking that, life is pleasure and that you're going to get another chance with reincarnation and don't worry about anything. Don't worry about morality. We can't know the answers. Why bother asking? All this sort of stuff. You've been fooled by Satan into believing all of that, and it's all very cute and fun, and life seems like you're in control and that everything's fine. But when you're sick and dying or when you're approaching death, I want this little seed that I'm planting to come and remind you that it's not too late. Yeah, you made some bad decisions. You ignored God's commandments on morality, but it's not too late.
Oh, David.
If this sounds heavy, just laugh it off.
No, it doesn't sound heavy. It's just it doesn't sound heavy. I know it's not too late. I can always turn back to God. I can always, I can always decide I was wrong and turn back to God and see. Yeah, I know. You're not going to like this, but I was sitting in my room once, and I closed my eyes and I said, "All right, Jesus, let's do this." I said, if you have anything to say to me, now's the time. And my whole room flooded with white light, and I said, "No, change my mind."
Oh God, it's not too late.
It's not too late. You're like, oh God, no. I was like, actually, no, I don't want to. So yeah, but I've had some talks with Jesus. I mean, in my time, and look, my feeling, and you're not going to agree with me, is that Jesus and I are good. That's what I was left with. I know you're going to think that was probably Satan masquerading as Jesus or something, but
I look on your experience as a good one with that light filling the room and whatever. And everything that happens, I mean, even if Satan himself came and the stench of him filled your room, even if that happened, that's a good thing too. Everything that happens is good, and God's allowing it to happen, for your greatest good. Everything that happens for your greatest good. It's custom made for you to maximize your eternal happiness.
For sure. Yeah, no, I mean, we can definitely agree that everything that happens is for our greatest good. I really believe that. I trust that.
So on that note, there are a lot of people out there that are sad and lonely, depressed, isolated. I mean, you should know you're a therapist, right? So what's a little message of hope that you could give to people? What would you say to anyone that might be out there listening now?
Well, I think I would just say something going off of, what you said. I would say trust. Trust life. Trust where your life is leading you. Trust God. Trust. That's what I would say.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is